All right, well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. And so some of the folks will still be signing in a little bit later here while we're talking. So good to have you this morning. Merry Christmas. I hope you're excited about Christmas being right around the corner for you. And so today we're going to be talking about resource planning. And so who is working on this project is just the kind of the question that I started with. I want you to notice something on the screen. You'll notice that there's two badges on this resource, on this on resources slides. And I want you to see, if you have not been keeping up with Project Management Institute and the changeover for everything from 2020 to 2021, a couple of changes has happened. And so I want you to see a couple of things. First off, their registered education program that they had for people who were doing training out here and giving PDUs ends on December 30th of 2020. And so this morning, and starting on January 2nd, it's called their ATP program, Authorized Training Partner program, begins. And so the requirements are much higher. And so that's one of the big pushes that PMI is trying to take the training partners to a different level. And so when you jump through those hoops, you're going to get a badge, and the badge over in the left-hand corner is the badge for the authorized training partner. And so we jumped through all those hoops back in July, and we were one of the first companies to do that. And so we are grateful that we're on this side of it. We've already got it done. Second change, for those of you who are involved in your chapters or your PMP training, second thing that has changed is PMI has now mandated that you will use PMI written material for all PMP boot camps. And so you purchase the material through PMI, and so they have an electronic version. They also have a print version. And if you're going to teach a class, you must be able to attend a two-day training program for them. So we did that in July as well. I was in the first class that they did virtually in July, and so we jumped through that hoop. So anybody who's going to be doing PMP training has to have this instructor badge, which is over in the top right-hand corner. And they're not able to buy the material, though. And that's one of the things that's different. The instructor cannot just buy the material. It has to be purchased through an authorized training partner. So those are two changes. And so those of you who are hiring instructors to come in and do your PMP, or you're doing it for a chapter, though you already know about this, I'm sure, but that's one of the big changes, is that the instructor has to be trained, have the badge, but also has to be working with an authorized training partner. According to PMI, some 60% of all boot camps that were being conducted across the world were being conducted by people who were not a registered education provider. And so they have sought to stop all of that and make sure that doesn't happen. So you're looking for both of these badges. If you're looking for a PMP trainer, you're looking for the badge on the left if you're looking to hire someone to give PDUs. So fortunately, we've done all of that. And so this is worth one PDU for you as well this morning. So welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about resource planning, who is working on this project. And it's a challenge. Resource planning is sometimes a challenge for an individual working on that project, because if you're working in a traditional organization, then you are sharing the resources with other people. And this person that you need is only working on your project, 40% of the time or 30% of the time. And so you've got real limited access to that person. So let's look at a couple of pieces of this. When we talk about resource planning involves really three different components for you to consider. One of those is going to be the people. Obviously, you need certain people on that team who have certain levels of expertise. One part of it's going to be the project side, because you're resourcing for the project. And the third is going to be the processes that you follow for resourcing. The processes that you follow for the people side might be a little different than the processes you follow for resourcing the things that are needed for the project to be able to complete the project, to build the building, the hardware, the software, the bricks, the mortar, the concrete, whatever you need for those type of resources. Resource planning really should be taking into account all three of these. And so what are the processes that we need to follow to get more people on our project? If it's internal, those processes will be far different than if you're hiring an outside vendor to come in. But in each case, what you're looking at is, how do we get the right people and the right things on for our project, and follow whatever process we need to be able to do this. And this is a headache for many project managers. And the reasoning being is because they don't own their resources. So what happens is they find themselves begging for those resources. And many times, because of the things that are needed for the project itself, you're having to go through some kind of pecking order to be able to get sign-offs and approvals to be able to fill the resources of the project. So all three of these are very difficult for a project manager. So are there these experienced team members? That's what you're asking yourself in the beginning. Are these experienced team members? Are there team members here that have special expertise in this area? And you might need them as you look at a team, because some of your projects I know are very specialized, and you're needing somebody that has just this type of subject matter expertise. So that will make a difference as well. The other thing is which methodology fits the project best. So let's talk about the processes again. Most of you who are in the field of project management all the time in PMPs, you already know that the traditional project management, which follows the processes talked about in PMBOK of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing, those are very important because you're running traditional projects. But the methodologies today that are evolving is much more in the area of Scrum and Agile and some of these. And so today what you're seeing is team members many times have to have an understanding of both sides. That's why the certification on both sides is so important. Many of your project management offices, when a project comes into the pipeline, they're looking to see which of the processes is going to fit this project, whether to go the traditional route or whether to go the Agile or Scrum route over on the right-hand side. So it's important for us as project managers to know that too. So do the team members understand the project processes? They maybe understand traditional waterfall, but they don't understand Scrum. And so what you're seeing is that there's that real gap of people who are trying to do it in a non-traditional way to try to get those people educated, upgraded in their training. Then the third thing is when you're looking at the project itself, what kind of historical data do we have on this project? That will tell you a little bit about the project and its resources. For an example, you start pulling some of the historical data. I'm looking at the people that were on the project, the schedule. I'm looking at the risk. I'm looking at some of those pieces. I'm looking at their resource log to see or their resource calendar to see who worked on that project back then and how did they do. If they came in severely late and they had 9 people, I'm probably going to look at it real heavy and see, did they have those 9 people full time, or what kind of percentage did they have? If we're doing another project just like that, only it's an upgrade, and you guys get into that I know a lot of times, then you're looking to say, okay, we've got to make an adjustment or we're going to have the same results that we had last time. So is this project similar to other projects? Is there historical information? Any of that on a traditional project will give you phenomenal insights. On Agile and Scrum, you probably have noticed, because it normally fits the new project, never been done before, you don't necessarily have that historical information, but you can still brainstorm with your team. What type of people do we need on this team? What subject matter expertise do we need? Now, validating resource estimates. One of the things that we get into in resource planning is you come across estimates. Now, these estimates can come from a lot of different things, and so not being critical, but we know that sometimes these estimates are really guesstimates. Somebody has put it down on a piece of paper, or they've asked for a certain amount of money for funding, and that got the money in the pipeline, but it wasn't really an estimate of this project. So, validating resource estimates with your SMEs. Your SMEs, your subject matter experts, are the ones that's going to be able to look at that timeline, look at that budget, and know whether or not we can do the project for those numbers. And so you're wanting your SMEs to be looking at this information as you get ready to pull that project together to see, are there any gaps? So estimates are the beginning for resource planning. Estimates on people or workers or on project resources. All of these estimates are there, but the problem is some of those estimates are more of a rough order of magnitude than they are definitive. So in the PMI world, when they talk about rough order of magnitude, they're saying that this estimate could be anywhere from a negative 25% to a positive 75%. So we could be under 25% or we could be 75% over on that estimate. Now that's too large of a range for us to be able to use those estimates in our project. So we've got to be able to work those down to something that's more manageable. And so with your SMEs, you're able to get it down to that definitive estimate, which should be a -5% to a +10%. In most cases, the estimates are going to be, you're wanting them to be no larger than 5 to 10% off when you're working that project. And you probably have noticed that that's kind of a baseline that many organizations have set for how the project is running. Because if you get above 10% in almost any company, any organization on a project, there's all these extra meetings that we have to go to. You know what I'm talking about? Everybody wants to meet you and talk with you because everybody's so friendly about this, aren't they? No, of course not. 10% is kind of high. And so what happens is you find yourself in meetings with managers or executive management where you're explaining what's happening and whether or not you think that you're going to be able to get that time and that money back under that 10% range. And maybe your company has a 5% range. That's really, really aggressive, but a 5% range. But most of the time you'll see somewhere between a 7 and a 10% range. Some companies will actually have some bars. So if you hit 7%, you have some general meetings. If you go over 10%, you start having all these nice friendly meetings with everybody. But the point is that you're not really wanting to, the point is not the meeting or to keep from having the meeting. The point is you want to be able to run that project as efficiently as you possibly can. All right, so you start creating a resource plan which makes sense for the culture of your organization. And one of the challenges I think sometimes we get into with using PMBOK, for an example, great tool, but sometimes people have assumed that you have to use all of PMBOK in every project, and that's not true. You as the project manager can look at PMBOK and decide which of these process groups of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing, and the plot processes underneath each of those sub-processes, which of these need to be used in this project, and this one, they don't need to be used as much. So that's what we're talking about with the culture. And so how do we fit the culture? Same thing if you're using Agile or Scrum. You're trying to fit Scrum into the culture, and some cultures will flourish with the Agile methods and Scrum methods, but the problem is some do not. So that's why many of you are caught in this hybrid type thing. And so you're having to do this hybrid where you're running a group in Scrum, but you're reporting in traditional. So creating a resource plan which matches the culture is imperative. So determine the best way to create the resource plan based on your culture, your people, your reporting efforts with management. Because regardless of what any book says, the point is you have to align with what management wants. If they need certain type of documents in certain type of intervals, you know what? It doesn't matter. You have to provide that. So plan the duration, the needs of the project first, and then move people into the project. So you want to look at the duration and what you're needing for the project. So don't start with the people as much as you will with kind of the project. So you kind of sketch out some of the things about the project. And here's what you're looking for. You're looking for expertise, specific expertise that might be more precise than what you generally have on the project. So if you don't have any real need for that, then of course any of the people you're assigning to the project team will be okay. But most of our projects will usually have one particular piece that you're really needing this expert, and we all know what that is, that particular SME to work on that piece of it. Plan the people side of a project first, and then move into the duration of the project. So you start with looking at the people you have. Then when you start looking at the project, the key thing you're looking at is their core competencies or certain expertise that's not in that core group of people. And then which philosophy makes a difference in the beginning point. So you can do it either way. You can plan the duration or you can plan the people. But what the point is, you're still looking in your mind at what expertise am I still missing on this project. Some suggestions that would help you in creating the resource plan would be look at other high priority projects currently in the pipeline. And why are we saying high priority projects? Because guess where your SME is going to be 9 times out of 10. If that man or woman happens to be the only SME in that area, they're going to be assigned probably to that higher priority project. So as much as you need that SME, you're having to fight for their time from a high priority project. So also create a high level project estimate. Create a list of SMEs and project team members who must work on the project. And so these are the must-haves. Now, let me talk about that for just a second. Sometimes I've seen on a list where people will put must-have, these are must-have people. And the point is they say, I must have this person because they're the best networking person we need. And yet when you're talking with the team, there's networking that's going to happen on this project, but do they absolutely have to have the best subject matter expert? Probably not. There's probably some other people that are in the pipeline of networking that have enough expertise to do that. And then, of course, if anything goes wrong, you still have the utopia SME person who you can bring in. So create a list of SMEs and project team members that you absolutely have to have, and bring in some of the SMEs to look at the estimates and maybe tighten them up a little bit, which is something that makes more sense to the timeline and also to the amount of people that you have working on the project and those available resources. So you always have access to that utopia SME person. But look and see if your project doesn't fit one of the ranges to where you can bring some of those people who are networking or whatever the expertise would be in early to work on your project. Okay, so here's what you're looking at in creating the resource plan. All right, first off, there's going to be the original project estimate. And then you'll have new estimates based on resource constraints and multiple projects. So we can say that the project's going to last 400 days. Okay, so it's a 400-day project. However, that's the original project estimate that somebody gave out, and so it's going to be $3 million in 400 days. However, by the time you get your SMEs in here and you get your team in here, and especially on the schedule side, and you start looking that you're trying to use internal people, then what happens is that original 400 days starts changing because you might not have enough people to be able to do that in 400 days. And that's just the norm. That's the norm across all companies. So your company, your organization is no different. Everybody's running their company on a shoestring right now, and they've been for the last several years. Not just for COVID, it's even more so for COVID, but they've been running it on a shoestring for a long time. Once you get the new estimates based on the resource constraints and multiple projects, you want to be communicating to the PMO or to your sponsor or to management, whoever that group is, what those estimates are looking like, because you've only got 9 people and you only have them a percentage of their time in most cases. So you're able to start communicating those. Now, the other piece that you're looking at is that piece of that project has probably expanded when you started looking at these people and talking to these people and looking how much availability they have. Because what we do so many times, our best people are almost always booked full time. And that's a good thing from the aspect of the company or the organization. But the problem with that is when you have another project get into the pipeline, these people are already resourced out. There's no more time for them. So you're having to then turn around and look and see, I can't get my A player, but can I get my B player? They just don't have the experience. They're good, but they're just not quite there yet. Now, here's some conditions which can expand the timelines, because this seems to be one of the first things that happens. The first is team members are working on multiple projects simultaneously. Happens all the time. You guys are doing it as well. And so this is the real world internally. Team members are also serving as a SME for other projects or special operational areas. Now, if you're serving as a SME, that's even a higher level of commitment to other projects than just being a team member, because where team members are working, you can actually plan some of that. I've got you for 20% of the time on this project. That team's got you for 30%. And this team over here has you for 25%. Well, we've just booked 75% of that person's time. But a SME is the person that gets drug in when there's a crisis. And we know what that is. You come in this morning, there's a crisis, and all of a sudden everything you had planned today gets stopped because you're having to work with these people to get the network back up, or to get some technology working, or because there's been a crisis, something didn't work. So the point is, a SME has a different level of commitment than just a normal team member, because we're bringing them in. So the project is new to the organization. That's going to expand the timeline. Why? There's a learning curve. And so it takes a little while to get familiar with it. You see this every day when you bring in a consultant. Many times, because of the lack of resources, you put something out for bid. So you hire a vendor, and so you put out an RFP, you finally sign a contract, you bring the vendor in, and sometimes people think that vendor is going to be hitting on all cylinders instantly. And they might be an expert in that field, but they're not an expert with you and your culture. And so that takes a little bit of a learning curve even for that vendor. Even if it's a great vendor, it'll still take a little bit of a learning curve. Also, if the project team has limited experience, what we're seeing as most of the baby boomers are leaving or have left the workplace, you've got great Generation X, Z's are coming into the workplace. You've also you also have millennials that are in the workplace. Great people, educated people. The problem is a lot of times the experience. Well, how are they going to get experience if we're not able to use them in some of these places? So if the project team has limited experience, usually they're doing it a little bit slower. They're a little bit more cautious. Most people don't want to have a failure. So what they do is they're purposely making sure that they do it right. They're asking a lot of questions. Nothing wrong with that. That from a quality standpoint, nothing wrong with that, but it does impact our timeline. And so do we want it fast or do we want it right when we've got inexperienced people? We'd rather have it right and go a little bit longer generally in most cases, unless it's a regulatory thing. And then last, risk analysis and data is limited. Because of the lack of experience, that also gets us into the area of risk. I can't think of all the risks that can happen because I don't have experience in that background. So I can give you some ideas, but there comes that point where that SME, that person who's done this for 100 years, is really valuable in this area. So these are some general conditions that can expand the timeline. Now, as we look at project resource management, the project team usually consists of individuals with assigned roles and responsibilities who work collectively to achieve a shared project goal. The project manager should invest suitable effort in acquiring, managing, motivating, and empowering the project team. Although the specific roles and responsibilities for the project team members are assigned, the involvement of all team members in the project planning and decision making is beneficial. Participation of team members during the planning adds their expertise to the process and strengthens their commitment to the project. Now, the point of this is what value your team brings to the table. People have roles and responsibilities, and sometimes we get tunnel vision of that we're only going to work in that area. We only want to talk about that area if you're going to talk to me. That's not where project management is going today. You already know that on a day-to-day basis. I could be that SME for just one thing, but if I'm in that meeting, there's other topics I can talk about and other experiences that I can have. But you want the participation of the team members. You do not want it to be like the old days where the project manager planned everything and just passed it off and all these people were just worker bees. You don't want that. And the reason for that is that nobody can do it today in a vacuum. You've got to have the people sitting around the table, and you've got good people. They're thinking, they're educated, they're willing to try to solve this. But if we don't engage them in some particular way in that resource plan, then they're just going to be a normal worker bee, and the project will only be as good as you and I are, and there's going to be gaps. Now, to show you in some of the planning, I thought I pulled this in. This was actually just an Excel sheet. This was actually the template in Excel for resource planning. So you have access to it if you have Office to be able to pull something like this in. But I thought this was a great way of doing this just to show you a sample. And so regardless of what type of project you have, you will find yourself listing on an Excel sheet probably, or in Microsoft Project or some project software, how many of these variety of subject matter experts, and that's what you have in the left-hand side, how many you need at different places in the project. Now, this has done it from an aspect of the subject matter expert or the resource type in the left-hand column, and then they gave you the months. They projected out in months, and that's fine. There's not a problem with that if your project's going to run up to a year, but you might have something different. You might have it in phases, you might have it in deliverables, you might plan it in a little different way. But I wanted to show you this because many times people have not thought through how many resources they might need in a given situation. And this is exactly the activity most experienced project managers will do. They will put down, based on a subject matter expert or based on experience, how many people they need in that area. And you kind of plan it all the way out. So some of these will be duplication of people, as you know, but the point is you need one person doing this. Now, the problem you get into when you say I need one is you're thinking I need one person who's going to be working for me for that length of time there, and yet you're pulling somebody in that you're only getting 20% of the time. And so sometimes when that one that you have, you're looking at trying to have them engage 75% of the time on something, but if I'm only getting them 25% of the time, then it's going to take three to make up that one that I have on this page, because I'm looking at one person who's going to work for me and give me 80% for that particular activity. But if I'm only getting them 20 or 25% of the time, it's going to take more than what I've just got there. So those are the dynamics that those of you who are planning every day on a project deal with constantly. And you're just praying there's no crisis on another project, because if there's a crisis over there, you lost that man or woman that's going to be working on your project for that 25% of the time, they're going to spend it on that crisis. But this is a great tool. All you have to do is just Google. If you want to use something like this, all you got to do is just go into your Microsoft Office and Google templates. This is just an Excel template, but I thought it was a good template for being able to do some of the basic scheduling. This might not be robust enough for you. Maybe you've got something else, no problem, but I wanted you to at least see that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the physical resources of a project, okay? Equipment, materials, facilities, infrastructure, a lot of different things are the internal makings of a project. And so physical resource management, you're looking at concentration and allocating using the physical resources, the materials, the equipment, the supplies, and that's exactly what you're seeing. One of the things I think was interesting just in the last month is right outside, just a few miles from where I live, they have there's a big piece of property that they just sold, and so they started a building, and so they put their start putting their foundation in, and then they started grading it for the parking lot, and they started the building. And so as I've been driving by to when I go into town for something, and I don't do this much, but they have built this building, and so I start guessing based on how the building looks as to what's going to go there. And so it's going to be a Dollar General store, and so we all pretty much know what a Dollar General store looks like. Now, I don't know that for a fact because they don't have a sign up yet, but based on the way it looks, that's what it's going to be. But you could see the subject matter experts. You could see the iron workers who were hanging the steel. You could see the concrete people who were doing the concrete. You could see the building people who were literally building a big metal building. And then you saw the block people, the brick and mortar people coming in and putting rock around the front to gussy it up a little bit. And so if I go through there in the next 2 weeks, guess what I'm going to see? I'm going to see another piece of that project where they've got the people who are going to stock this place. They're going to build the shelves inside there, and I'm sure they've got a layout as part of their project plan of how that building goes for Dollar General or General Dollar or whoever that building is, but it's going to be one of those, I'm pretty sure. And so then their project, those internal people, their project is setting the store up. And then you'll have the people come in right behind, and they'll put chips on the shelves and sodas on the shelves and the whole deal. And so I've watched that the whole time. And what you're looking at here is these were experts that were coming into doing their piece of it, and they have built this thing in record time. I mean, it has just not taken much time to build. It took longer for them to get the property set than it did to build the building, and then it has just flourished. Now, failing to manage and control all the resources efficiently is a source of risk for successful project completion. And so failure to secure critical equipment or infrastructure on time may result in delays in the manufacturing of the final product. Ordering low quality material may damage the quality of the product, causing a high rate of recalls or rework. And keeping too much inventory may result in high operational costs and reduce organizational profit. So unacceptably low inventory levels may result in not satisfying the customer demand and reduce profit. So what you're looking at here is a balancing act. So if I've got too much material, I've got a lot of money sitting in my parking lot waiting to go inside the store or go on the store. If I don't order enough and I don't order it quick enough, then what happens is now when the people are ready to do something to lay the brick hasn't arrived. And so you guys are doing this every day, looking at making sure, trying to get your material there just in time. And most of you have a great insight into the order. Now, COVID didn't help the situation. It's hurt some of the delivery efforts across on many projects. And so that was something that you couldn't have planned for. But the point is that most people have a good understanding of that. All right, on the other side, your team resources or personnel refer to the human resource side. And so personnel may have varied skills, may be assigned full-time, part-time, may be added or removed from the project as it progresses. And so you're going to have people who are going to be working throughout from the start to the end of the project. They're going to stay continuously. You'll have some that will be pulled off. In addition, you're going to be acquiring these team members. And one of the things that you want to do is look at three different things. One, diversity. What is the diversity background of this team? Do I have enough depth in diversity to be able to have people who are going to solve the problems that come up or deal with the risks that come up? Second is location. Where are these people working from? If you're doing Scrum, their preference is co-located, even though many of our Scrum teams cannot be for other reasons. So are the team members co-located or are they dispersed? So how long is it going to take for me to get that SME who's working on 5 other projects and they're on site at one of the projects that's 100 miles away? How long is it going to take me to get that SME here when I need them for my crisis? And then also the team, are team members full-time or part-time to your project? And if they are full-time, that's awesome. awesome, but sometimes we assume I've got Randy full time, so I'm going to use Randy 40 hours a week. And that's not really realistic either, because in most cases, people are not productive 40 hours a week. And so by just scheduling him for 40 hours a week, I have automatically kind of set my schedule up for it to run behind schedule on some things, because I have not been diligent enough in understanding that Randy's not going to work 40 hours a week and be productive all 40 hours. Considerations for agile and adaptive environments. Now, we know that the preference for that revolves around the idea of them being co-located. So projects with high variability benefit from team structures that maximize focus, collaboration, such as self-organizing teams with generalizing specialists. Collaboration is intended to boost productivity and facilitate innovative problem solving. Collaborative teams may facilitate accelerated integration of distinct work activities, improve communication, increase knowledge sharing, and provide flexibility of work assignments. So we do, and we believe in the workings of collaboration. We want our team to collaborate. The challenge that you get into is, how are they going to collaborate? If they're face-to-face, great. If they're doing it co-located, then it's a little bit more of a challenge. So you're needing a tool like Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using to be able to see the person and talk with the person. But collaboration has to continue regardless of whether or not they're co-located or not. Excuse me. The other thing that you need is feedback from the SMEs. Our engagement of the SME is going to be very important. Expertise should be considered from individuals or groups with specialized knowledge or training. Negotiating for the best resources within the organization is what you find yourself doing with management or the PMO. Talent management, personnel development, determining the preliminary effort level needed to meet project objectives, determining reporting requirements based on the organizational culture. That's going to make a difference on certain people that you must have on your project. Now, there's a lot of people you could put on your project, and I think you understand the difference here. But there's some people I absolutely have to have that person on this project because of these issues. Now, one of the things that will help you in kind of coming up with who the pots of people you need is going to be a resource breakdown structure. Now, if you've not done this, this is not a big deal. It looks like a WBS, like a work breakdown structure, but people are using a resource breakdown structure to break down the categories of resources that you need, and you start breaking it down for different aspects of the project. So a resource breakdown structure is a hierarchical list of team and physical resources related by category and resource type that is used for planning, managing, and controlling the project. Each descending level represents an increasing detailed description of the resource until the information is small enough to be used in conjunction with the WBS to allow the work to be planned, monitored, and controlled. So a WBS and an RBS, that's a resource breakdown structure, is going to look the same. So as you look at this, this has all the makings of what you would say is a work breakdown structure. It looks very similar. Why? Because it's a breakdown structure. But if you look across that top line, what you see in that top line in the categories here, all the way across through here, this is where the different categories of resources, okay? And so as you look at that, what you see is, okay, I've got personnel, so I've got resources for personnel and bricklayers, concrete, and so forth. I've got material, bricks, hardware, floors, marble, and then I've got equipment. I've got backhoe, scaffolding, bulldozer, and so forth. So that top line that you're doing are going to be the pots of resources you need: people and stuff, the stuff you need to build your project, okay? Now, bricklayers, you're looking at 8 hours. Concrete workers might be 4 hours a day. Now, I put 8 hours, but let me go ahead and say something about that. I would not schedule anybody for 8 hours, and most of the experienced project managers know what I'm talking about. Most of your people are not going to work the 8 hours. Probably from 6.5, 7 hours would be even a stretch in some cases, because that other hour is going to deal with other things such as crisis or something like that. So if I'm really looking at this, I'm probably scheduling them closer to 6.5 hours than anything else. But I put the 8 hours there just to follow consistency of how much time I have them for the purpose. The other thing is, with bricklayers, if I'm looking at money for this, I'm looking at my bricklayers and how many days they're going to be working. What do I pay my bricklayers an hour, or how I'm paying my bricklayers if I'm doing this internally and I'm coming up with my numbers? If I'm looking at my concrete people, I'm doing the exact same thing. And this is how some of you folks are doing your estimates too. Nothing wrong with that. This is what you're coming up with. And of course, your finishers, how much are they making an hour, and so forth. And and then you come up with my estimate for this piece of work would be X number of dollars without analyzing any risk. So this is one of the ways that many people will come up and calculate their actual resources they need per risk breakdown, per resource breakdown structure item. Now let's look at another piece of this. This is going to be your RAM, your responsibility assignment matrix. It shows the project resources assigned to each work package. Now your work package looks like what we just looked at, which is your resource breakdown structure, but it's used to illustrate the connections between work packages and activities in the teams themselves. Now when we talk about RAM, the number one RAM that's talked about in PMBOK, as you know, is called the RACI. And so that stands for responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. Those are your four acronyms there. And so it's a useful tool to use to ensure clear assignments of roles and responsibilities when the team consists of internal and external people. The project manager is always accountable. The project manager is going to be the A, and they have authority. And so if you think of authority and A, that's going to help you. The responsible is going to be the worker B. So team members are responsible for completing the work, but the project manager is accountable because they're the one who has the authority. So this is what a RACI looks like. Many of you use this in the real world. I know I'm singing to the choir here for many of you that are on here. And so this is what a RACI looks like. And so you've got the activities down the left-hand side. You've got the people. You'll see that Carol is a PS. That's going to be the project sponsor. Mike's the PM. And then Juan, Debbie, and Frank, those are all workers. Okay, those are all team members. And so if you look at the A, anything that has an A shows that that's what that person is supposed to be doing. So notice that creating the charter is going to be Carol's responsibility because she's the sponsor of that, okay? And then also you'll notice Mike, he has the authority. So look at the different A's underneath that. So collecting requirements, that's going to be the responsibility, or that's going to be, he's accountable for that. Drafting designs, developing test plans, program software. Mike is going to be accountable for that. Even though Mike might use other people, he's the one accountable for that. Next, look at resource management plan itself. Identification of the resources we've referred to, such as methods of identifying, quantifying teams, physical resources. Acquiring resources, be guidance on how to acquire teams and physical resources for the project. And then those roles and responsibilities that we talked about. The role is going to function assumed by or assigned to a person in the project, such as a BA would be business analyst, such as testing coordinator, risk manager, so forth. And then under authority, the right to apply project resources, makes decisions, signs approvals, accepts deliverables, influences others to carry out the work of the project. And then the R for responsibility here that we're looking at is going to be assigned duties, work that the project team is expected to perform in order to complete the project's activities. And then you've got confidence. The confidence of the people is going to make a difference. Skill and capacity required to complete assigned activities within project constraints. Now, one of the things you probably have dealt with already in the real world, as most of you probably have, is this issue of confidence. Good people, they're learning this stuff, but they don't have the confidence level to be able to take it and run for themselves. So you find yourself coaching and mentoring these people. Nothing wrong with that. That's part of it. Next piece of this would be training strategies for the team members. How are you as a project manager going to train your people and equip them and so that they do have confidence? Training helps with that confidence component. Then team development itself, methods for developing the project team, resource control, methods for ensuring adequate physical resources are available as needed, and that acquisition of physical resources is optimized for project needs. And then recognition plan. Do we give any recognition? Now, I'm not talking about tons of money because many organizations don't do that, but which recognition and rewards would be given to these team members when will they be given? What can we do to honor these people when they do good stuff and say something about it? If nothing else, thanking them for the job they've done. The next item that we want to talk about with resource management in our teams is going to be a team charter. Team charter is not the same as a project charter. A project charter deals with giving authority and appointing the project manager. A team charter is a document that establishes the team values, agreements, operating guidelines, team values, communication guidelines, decision-making criteria and process, conflict resolution process, meeting guidelines, and team agreements. Team charter has taken the place of what we would call the code of conduct And so it's basically how we're going to treat each other, how we're going to get along in our teams. And so this is the new term that is coming out in all of your material if you haven't already seen it. And so most of you know what I'm talking about. You also have a resource calendar. A resource calendar would be one of those early documents that you would need because you're looking to see, are my people that I really need, my SMEs and my team, free to be able to work on this project? So it identifies the working days, shifts, start and end in normal business hours, weekends, public holidays, when each specific resource is available, information on which resources such as team resources, equipment, and material are potentially available during a planned activity is used for estimating resource utilization. You specify when and for how long identified team and physical resources will be available during the project. This information may be at the activity level or at the project level. Now you'll notice in this PowerPoint that I not only talked about the persons, the people, but I talked about the equipment. And so, in other words, for an example, you see the same thing happening with equipment in looking at the resources. That bulldozer going to be free to be able to work on my project on that slot on that piece of ground for those dates. And so you'll see that with especially big pieces of equipment where people will bring that in. What's the basis of the estimates? Amount and type of additional details supporting the resources estimate vary by application. Regardless of the level of detail, the supporting documentation should provide a clear and complete understanding of how the resource estimate was derived, what method did we use, and what resources were used to develop the estimate. Who, and depending on who does it, gives us the confidence level of that estimate. And then sometimes you're going to find yourself acquiring resources. Project manager or project team should negotiate, influence others who are in a position to provide the required resources. And so whether it's personal, whether it's people or equipment, failure to acquire necessary resources for the project could affect project schedules, budgets, customer satisfaction, quality, risk, and insufficient resources or capabilities decreases the probability of success. So it's very important for us to be able to know we've got the right people involved. If team resources are not available due to constraints such as economic factors or assignments to other projects, the project manager and project team may be required to assign alternative resources, perhaps with different competencies and costs. Now, these different competencies and costs is what we're talking about with the B team. Good people, but we need them to be working on the project, but they're not my number one person. But some of your projects will not notice any difference. Your B team is good enough to get that project done. Now, after we get our people and we know who we're working with, we get into this thing of interpersonal and team skills. Many projects need to negotiate for required resources, and the project management team may need to negotiate with functional managers to ensure that the project receives the best resources possible in the required time frame until the responsibilities are complete. But this can be a challenge, these interpersonal skills. And one of the biggest challenges that you see in any of this is pre-assignments. If you are a SME, you already live in this world. This is a challenge. A pre-assignment is when physical or team resources for a project are determined in advance. We do this all the time at the management level. You look at this and you start saying, okay, I need this person here and this person here and this person here for those projects. And so we pre-assign them before the project even comes down the pipeline. So this situation occurs if the project is a result of specific resources being identified as part of a competitive proposal, or if the project's dependent upon the expertise of particular people. And it's that second piece there where it talks about expertise of particular people that we purposely get people in there. Now, what has become very common in recent years is people are starting to use virtual teams more often. You create new possibilities with acquiring project team members, groups of people with shared goals who fulfill their roles with little or no time spent face to face. Now, virtual teams are working. You're even seeing on LinkedIn and Indeed where they're looking for virtual project managers. That's been something that has been growing for the last couple of years. And so you never step foot on site. You run everything virtually from from using technology like we're doing here. Now, physical resource assignments would be a documentation of physical resource assignments, records the material, the equipment, supplies, location, physical resources that will be used during the project. All right, we referred to this on developing the team. Let's talk about it again. The project management team should capitalize on cultural differences, focus on developing and sustaining the project team throughout the project life cycle, promote working together interdependently in a climate of mutual trust. But you have to develop your team in that direction. And by doing that, that's going to require creating a dynamic and cohesive and collaborative team, empowering the team, and improving their knowledge and skills. And so this falls into the realm of what the project manager is trying to do in order to be able to move them to that next level. This also requires that we manage the team correctly. The project manager needs to be sensitive to both the willingness and the ability of the team members to perform their work, adjust the management and leadership styles accordingly. So I can't just have one style and stick to that. I have to adjust it. And team members with low skill abilities will require more intensive oversight. And that's the reason why your project gets slower when you use new people on it, is because of that oversight. How are they going to make decisions? How are you making decisions? So the ability to negotiate and influence the organization and the project management team, rather than the set of tools described in the decision-making tool set, makes a huge difference. Now, this process that we're kind of showing you here for guidelines for decision-making is imperative. You focus on the goal, follow a decision-making process, look at the environmental factors, analyze available information that you have at that time, and then stipulate team creativity of what you've got to get out of them, and then account for any kind of risk. All of that has to be looked at when we're trying to solve a problem or make a decision. The other thing that you find yourself doing is influencing others. Because project managers often have little or no direct authority in a traditional organization, you find yourself having to influence them. Now, here's some key influencing skills: the ability to persuade, to articulate your point and position, high level, active, and effective listening skills, awareness of and consideration for the various perspectives in any situation, gathering relevant information. All of that is going to be part of influencing others and your team and building the trust. They're going to trust you over time. Leadership is becoming a heavier driver than management. Leadership, the ability to lead a team, inspire them to do the job, it's going to be imperative today with what you're working on. Now, let me change gears for just a moment and hit a couple of quick things for you. One of the things that I told you that I would talk about very quickly is motivational theory. Now, those of you who are PMPs know motivational theory is very much part of the PMP test, and motivational theory is something that we have to do even if the team members don't report to me. Now, one of the motivational theories that is used a lot is called expectancy theory, and this is by Victor Vroom. And this is the idea that people will do a better job if they anticipate a positive outcome. So if I brag on them, if I'm noticing their job, if I say good things, thank them for doing the job, what does that do? That is a form of motivation for some people. The second one happens to be the hierarchy of needs. All of you have probably heard of this. Abraham Maslow is probably the most famous of all the motivational theories. Almost any book that talks about motivation of people at all, they're going to quote Maslow as one of the foundational. One of the challenges you and I get into with Maslow, though, is you'll notice that there's several categories here. And if you go from the bottom, that's going to be physiological. What does that mean? Food, clothing, shelter. And so, in other words, I've got to make sure you've got food, clothing, shelter if I ever want to get you to that self-actualization, which would be looked at in Maslow's hierarchy as the highest self-motivated person could be. The challenge we get into is trying to bring that up in a situation and in an organization. But physiological, absolutely, food, clothing, and shelter. Who cares whether or not they're motivated for other things if they're starving, if they don't have a place to live, if they're homeless? All those kind of pieces fit into this. One that many of you have probably heard, whether you knew the theorist or not, it's McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. Now, here's what McGregor said about Theory X. See if you've ever heard this before. Managers or project managers think that people are basically lazy and they will not work unless they have strong supervision. So what happens? It's that mindset that a project manager says, well, let me go to the team meeting. I'm sure they're not doing anything if I'm not there. Let me go check on everybody. I'm sure they're not doing anything if I'm not there. You see what I'm getting at? We've all heard that. And sometimes there's even truth in that. Let's call it the way it is. Sometimes there are those people who, unless you're there, nothing's happening. But that's a Theory X. It's a mindset that people are basically lazy. Theory Y is the opposite. Theory Y says, you know what? I got good people. I know they're doing their job. Let me see how I can support them. Let me see how I can help them. So that's a theory why type of thing. Fielder's contingency theory has been something that's been a little more popular in the last 5 to 8 years. Fred Fielder is the theorist, and he states that effective leadership depends only on the not only on the style of leading, but on the control over a situation. Now, in all truthfulness, we all like control. That's why in project management, if I can control it and not give that control away, I mean, sure, I like that because I know me and you know you, and I bet you have a lot of those same characteristics. We like the control because if we're accountable for it. Well, that was what Fielder was saying, and part of what he would do is he would build his team around this. Now, I would not do this on paper ever, but Fielder has what's called LPC, least preferred coworker. Now, we all talk about this person and these people, okay, but we would never put it on paper for real. But this is one of the analysis that he does. And so LPC, least preferred coworker, you would look at your team in setting up your team from uncooperative to cooperative. And you would then score them. And of course, here they're doing a 1 to 8 score, but it could be a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10. And so how are they more on the uncooperative side or cooperative? So it's the idea of take Frank, he's not doing anything. Well, if Frank is a rascal that's hard to get along with, that's not who you're really wanting. But many times, Frank is that subject matter expert that we all have to have. So this is an interesting little tool. I would never do this in real life and for anybody to see it, because if you think you're having problems with Frank now, wait until Frank reads his name listed and that he's way over here on the unfriendly and uncooperative and hostile side. You're going to have nothing but problems with Frank. The value this brings to the table in our thought process is tremendous. Who fits the culture of my team? Is my team cooperative, willing to cooperate with each other? Are they friendly? Are they going to be supportive? We all have those discussions, even though we might not use something to this extent. And then David McClellan is a theorist, and he did what was called need theory, and the idea that workers need three foundational things. They need affiliation, power, and achievement. And so here's the thing that's interesting is we like the affiliation. We're connected to something. We like having some power, don't have to be have all power, but we like having some power and achievement. We like being able to achieve things and being able to know that we have reached those levels and we've done a good job. Now, here's the thing that's interesting about those three. Do you know that those three are also used to get people into cults? Do you know that those three are used to get people into gangs? What is happening? It's affiliation, it's power, it's achievement. So those things are such a motivator that even where we're talking about trying to use them in a positive way, many people have used them already in a very negative way. And so motivation can be on good or bad in some of these cases. Now, let me pull this thing together for you this morning and talk about a couple of things here to kind of give you some heads up on. Well, first off, as you know, the PMP is changing as of January 2nd. So all material will be purchased from PMI. It has to use the book. They have to have the badges like we just showed you. And so here's a listing of what we have going for this next year. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. And so we're going to do live instructor-led virtual boot camps at least through this first half of the year while we're still dealing with the virus. We will examine as time goes on whether or not we will roll out actual face-to-face in a hotel or type of thing. If an organization is wanting us to do an on-site, we will work that out with them to do an on-site PMP boot camp. But we have 6 virtual instructor-led live virtual PMP boot camps that we will be doing. And so we will be using the new material. I've already taught the new material 5 times and my passing rate is about 80% first time passing, 99% out of 3. And that's the same type passing rate that we had for the first time passing rate with our own materials. The material's excellent, excellent material. Many of the people who claim to have 99% first time passing rate normally are kind of fudging because you don't normally have 99% first time passing rate. Most will have some will have 40 and 50% first time passing rates where we have 80. But 99.99 is out of 3 attempts. Most of the companies who claim it out of 3 as well. So we'll have we have 6 virtual instructor led. We also have a live instructor led virtual ACP. That's your Agile certified professional. So we're going to do one in May and one in November for that. And it'll be instructor led as well. We'll be using Zoom just like we do here. You'd get a link. And so all of these would be guaranteed. You have an option for the guarantee if you'd like, just like normal. Now, what you'll notice as you're booking for these is that This gives you the capability to take your test, gives you capability to take your training. And also PMI and Pearson, who does the testing, has made changes to where you can take your test on video now. Let me explain this just a moment if you're not familiar with this. In the past, you had to take your test in a face-to-face location and sit there at a terminal and take it to where somebody physically saw you. Since COVID has come on board, Pearson has adjusted and worked it out to where you can take your test virtually. But there's a couple of changes to that. So you would do your boot camp, you'd sign up for PMI just like normal, tell them you want the virtual test. And so at your home or at your office, you would take your virtual test. And so they've got video running on you at the whole time. Now, there's two things that we've noticed that's different from the people who've taken the virtual test. Number one, the knowledge dump is not, you're not able to do the knowledge dump the same way. You can do a knowledge dump on a whiteboard that's in the program. And so which is going to take a little bit longer because you're writing with your, you're going to be writing with your mouse kind of thing. But you don't have you can't have a piece of paper. You can't have a calculator. Nothing can be on your table as you sit there around you. And you literally take pictures from all different sides. And then you'll do your test. So that's one of the changes. Second change that we've noticed is that somewhere in the middle of the test, you'll be able to get up and take a break. And so they give you a 10-minute break in the middle. Here's the thing though. Any of those questions you've already answered, you cannot go back to them. So you can take a break, but like, let's say you've done 120 questions. Those first 120 you can't go back to. And so it starts with 121, and then you can work on those questions and go back and forth to those. But once the break happens, all those are done. You can't look at anything else. So you definitely want to make sure that you're giving an answer all the way through, because you're going to lose an opportunity to check with that on that first half. So those are two of the changes that have happened with video, the video testing. But Pearson's been doing a good job with this. The passing rate has really been pretty much the same that we've seen with this. And I think you're going to see, at least for the first 6 months, some of that to still be happening. So here's some things that we're looking at. And so if you're still looking to do your PMP, then that'll give you an opportunity to plan for it. We're ready to go with the new material and everything like this. Now, let me close out with this. Resource management is something that we have to think through. It can't be something that we just sling over the fence and come up with a resource plan. We have to think through our equipment and the right people on that team. If we don't have the right equipment or the right people, our project's going to struggle and could possibly come in late or way over budget, or worse, there's so much conflict, we don't even know what's happening on the project. So let me thank you guys so much for being part of this. Let me thank you so much for tuning in every month for our webinars. I appreciate it so much. And if I can help you in any way, or if I can answer any questions for you in any way, please contact me. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and I hope you enjoy your time with your family. God bless you guys. Thank you for being on the call this morning. Have a great week. Bye now.